Hi guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to have some Division 13 ranked online gameplay in the middleweight division. It's going to be a Rob Whittaker mirror match, and as you can see from the bottom right there, my opponent's been in Division 20 quite a lot, and this opponent actually at the time of recording was in Division 20 and was in the top 100. And I'll show you his ranking in a minute. But this is the ranking after the fight, which is important. So obviously my opponent was higher up, I'm not sure where in the top 100, but I believe after the gameplay he was maybe top 40 if I remember correctly. This gameplay was from a couple weeks ago. And so here my opponent's got me down, tries to go straight away for a submission, and here I was like, okay, I feel very confident in getting out of this. I got out. My opponent then goes for the same submission again, which we deny. Then my opponent goes for it again, which I also deny. And then we decided that I had to get my opponent off straight away, because I thought here that my opponent would have been draining my stamina to then go for the submission again, which is a lot of people's tactics. You know, they use that to, in a way, it's like a little exploit. You're draining both of each other's stamina, and then you submit the opponent. And as you can see there, earlier on the top right, it showed the leaderboards for the top 100 and where my opponent was ranked. So very early on I could see here that my opponent was going to be very, very grappling orientated, which is quite surprising considering he was using Robert Whittaker. But then it's not too much of a surprise, because Rob is an amazing wrestler in real life. Obviously he could have been selected to the Olympic team, and he's got all the credentials. And there's some fighters that really surprise you with how good their wrestling are on the game, and Robert Whittaker is definitely one of them. 100% the best fighter in middleweight. You can do anything you want with him, and as you'll see in this gameplay, if you really want to wrestle with Rob, you can wrestle with Rob. He's a very similar in the sense that in the game he's like a black belt in MMA. He's good at literally everything. I'd put him in the same bracket as Petr Yan. Yan is another one who I think is just phenomenal. You can perform any game plan you want with him. And as you can see here, we're taking my opponent down. My opponent's getting up. And then we're just going to bully my opponent down again. We're just going to keep ragdolling my opponent. Wait for my opponent to try reverse onto backside, which my opponent does there. And we're just looking to control my opponent now. So I want to show my opponent that, okay, you want to grapple, you want to initiate all the grappling exchanges, that's fine, but let me show you what I'm going to do. And as you can see here, that's all I'm doing. And this is purposely, like, I'm letting my opponent get straight back just to drag my opponent straight down. And it's just really to demoralize my opponent. We take my opponent's back here, get off the deny, and then we try to backflip my opponent, and I'm just waiting, being patient. We get off the deny again, and this is where, as you can see, I'm just being very patient, because if I throw strikes from here, my opponent could then end up doing that thing where you like shrug me off and shake me off. And then we go for an armbar of our own here, and I knew there wasn't much time left on the clock. I just wanted to see how good my opponent's submission defense was, purely based on the fact that because my opponent wanted to initiate the grappling exchanges, and now that we've had this exchange for the whole of round 1, I feel like I've definitely got the better of my opponent. Therefore, if the fight goes to the ground again, I can look to tire out my opponent and then go for a submission finish. So those are the stats for the rounds. You can see I had 2 minutes and 40 seconds of control time. So in my eyes, that round definitely went to me. My opponent opens up with a leg kick, and here, now I'm waiting to see how my opponent moves, how he moves on the ground. And as my opponent went to strike, I go for the takedown and we get the trip. So we're initiating the grappling exchanges now, because the way round 1 went, I just felt so comfortable. So here I'm trying to really control my opponent on the ground. Going into the fight, of course, it's not the game plan I would have implemented, and my opponent does a good job here of getting up. But due to the success, obviously, that I had in the first round in controlling my opponent both in the clinch and on the ground, it's a game plan that now I'm looking to initiate. And as you can see, we take my opponent down again with relative ease, and here we're just going to keep controlling my opponent, look to do small amounts of damage and really build up the momentum. I feel like once you deny a couple transitions, especially from side control, you're pretty much in control, and that's exactly what I'm looking to do. I don't want to give my opponent any chance to end up on top, but even when my opponent was on top, we saw what happened. Like I said, he was going for the submission, I think it was the armbar, didn't work, and then he kept going for it, I was denying it, then he kept going for it, I was denying it. and I was just worried that my stamina was going to get to a point where it was so low that he'd get the submission off easily. And that's something I'm very conscious of now, is that if my opponent gets to the top, maybe could he look to do something like some sort of exploit potentially. I always think about that because there's so many things broken with this game, and my opponent might not have even been doing anything like that. It's just the way the game works. And from here we get my opponent back into side control, and side control by far is the most dominant position. That crucifix, top mount's very dominant, back sitting's also very dominant. And if any of you guys would like to see a video maybe where I show like a graph and really talk through why I think certain positions are advantageous and why I'd say certain positions are better than others, then let me know in the comments. I really wouldn't mind doing that. I've got a graph already showing how I would rate each of those positions based on set questions. Here we get my opponent into the crucifix, and this round has just been extremely dominant, and I'm waiting for my opponent to move first so I can get the deny, which I do, and then my opponent does an excellent job of then shrugging me off. But my opponent's had no success of getting up here. The denies have been on point, and just the overall controlling and rolling with the positions has been very good. We've done small amounts of damage. My opponent's stamina is obviously going to get lower and lower. Round 3 is obviously going to be a big round because it's interesting to see how my opponent's going to come out. My opponent's obviously an extremely high level player and knows that he's now down 2-0. I've definitely won both rounds. My opponent needs to come out and get a finish here because winning the round's not going to be enough. And that's the thing with 3-round fights, because you don't have the rounds to work with. Once you need a finish, you really need to go all out in that final round. And often or not, that's how a lot of players end up losing. And here we go for the takedown, which my opponent does deny. And that could have been the start of the momentum switch in that denial there. But now that we're on the feet, I still feel very confident on the feet. Obviously, with how good Rob Whittaker is, the punch power, we're mixing it up, going to the leg. We just can't afford to take too much damage. I know that I've done a very decent amount of damage to my opponent's head health due to the side control elbows. So I'm just being very patient. I know it's going to take less to stun my opponent or finish my opponent than it is for him to finish me. But coming up against Rob with how powerful he is, anything could happen. You just got to be very cautious. And as you can see there, the stand-ups are really going either way at the moment. Both landing here and there. My opponent's throwing head kicks. We land a good straight there. We're mixing it up very well. The hook stuns my opponent. We go for that beautiful combo that it does in real life, especially that head kick. It just works so well. And right now we're keeping my opponent guessing, really pressuring my opponent just because my opponent's towards the fence. Go for the teep kick there. And even when my opponent's hurt, I'm constantly trying to mix it up, give my opponent a different look each time. We get the knockdown here, and this is the best position to be in when you get a knockdown, because the fighter's against the cage. You control the centre of the octagon. You can really pin them there. Land the straight, which drops my opponent, and we don't look to jump on top because I was expecting the up kick. We're doing very good work to the body, and all of this has come from the work of prior rounds, the domination on the ground. And not only that, is that when the fight did go to the feet, the constant mixing up. When my opponent had low stamina, I'd hit the body and it zapped the body health, zapped the stamina, and then I'd go for the leg, go for the head. And you've got to keep your opponent guessing, because the more you do the same thing, obviously the more predictable it's going to be. The increased likelihood is your opponent's going to catch you with something. And at this level, when you're facing opponents like this, you've got to be given a different look every time. And if you do that, you do it successfully, you could end up winning the fight as I did here. So that was the video for today. Please like, comment and subscribe if you're new. And thank you for watching.